The cataloging project of the ACEI or PeACE-High system basis originated in 2017 within my research conducted at the University of Brescia in the First World War. It subsequently developed through a series of workshops, meetings, journal articles, and books, ultimately culminating in my doctoral thesis. What is the troposcatter communication system used by the PeACE-High network? It must be considered that during the Cold War era, Europe was divided into two opposing blocs, NATO and the Warsaw Pact, which constantly monitored and observed each other. In this context, the communication of information among member states, particularly within NATO, became crucial. For this reason, traditional radio transmission stations based on LOS, line of sight technology, were initially utilized. However, this technology had signal transmission limitation due to the presence of physical obstacles, the curvature of the Earth, and the ease with which it could be intercepted, in addition to requiring relay stations at short distances from one another. To overcome this limitation, the OH over the horizon troposcatter system was introduced, in which a directional radio signal aimed into the troposphere scattered and bounced back toward the Earth. This approach bypassed physical obstacles, overcame the issue of the Earth's curvature, and most importantly, rendered the signal highly difficult to intercept. Furthermore, stations could be positioned at the great distances from each other. The troposcatter system was implemented across all NATO communication networks, and my research specifically focused on the ACE-I system, which covered Europe, starting from Turkey, ascending through Greece and Italy, and reaching France, from where it was transmitted to the United Kingdom. My project has catalogued all the bases of this system in Europe. As can be observed regarding the United Kingdom, there was a backbone of stations positioned in the eastern part of the island, which ascended from France to connect to the Faroe Island, and from there, through another system, it reached the United States via Greenland and Canada. My work was further developed by creating a framework that clearly summarized the entire network and its evolution of the years, given that it underwent modification over time. In addition to cataloging the bases, the project produced a general layout of development and management of the SI line, systematizing all the information retrieved for the lateral review. Let us now examine the Mount Giogo Base, a major communication backbone that received the signal from southern Italy and redirected it to France, from where it ascended toward the United Kingdom. From Monte Giogo, the signal was also transmitted to eastern Italy, as this area directly bordered the Warsaw Pact, and therefore constituted a vital node for information acquisition, which necessarily had to be connected and transmitted to all NATO countries. Entrance to the base is through a pedestrian gate and a driveway gate. Once past the entrance, we found ourselves in the main country yard, which all the base management buildings overlook. First of all, where there is a small guardhouse where the soldiers who controlled access to the site were stationed. The entire base is surrounded by a double wire fence, providing a walkway between the two sections of fencing to allow movement along the entire perimeter. Overlooking the main country yard to the right of the main entrance is the troop barracks, which is actually divided into two parts. One part was intended for the military personnel who managed the base, while a separate part was instead intended for the carabinieri, or military police, who were tasked with guarding the entrances. The entire barracks featured a basement level that was used as a warehouse storage facility, and parking lot for the Carabinieri vehicles, as they were managed separately from the troops running the base. In fact, the Carabinieri come from the neighboring town to guard the area and therefore had their own garages and their own rooms to live in. Returning to the courtyard, we go up into the troop building by an external metal staircase and immediately notice the difference between the two sections of the building. On the right was the entire complex of rooms intended for the Carabinieri, which the underlying garage for storing their vehicles, while on the left was the part of the buildings intended for the troops who resident in and directly manage the base. The structure is characterized by a long corridor overlooked by the rooms where the soldiers stayed, as well as the shared showers and bathrooms. From the quarters, following this very long corridor, we reach the common area for troop lives, which features a large mess hall containing the dining tables and the soldiers' recreational and social areas. In the background, you can see what remains on the telephone booth, and of course, the kitchen where meals were prepared for the troops. Having stepped out into the square again, it is possible to see on our right what is instead the garage intended for the vehicles of the base. This is the garage in which there were the vehicles at the disposal of the troops to move both inside and outside the base. At the end of the square, before the climb to the actual technical buildings, lies the bunker, isolated from the rest of the building. It was intended as a small armory. In the background, one begins to glimpse what is the entire technology management part of the base. Having come out of the bunker, we also begin to see the huge satellite dishes for the reception and transmission of the troposcatter radio signal, which, in these cases, were orientated toward the station of La Tolfa near Roma, located at the distance of about 280 kilometers. Going up the road inside the base, we see, on the summit of the hill, the technological buildings at the large antenna for traditional line of sight communication, aimed at Cavriana. To our right, we see from above the main square with the troops building. Continuing along the climb, we begin to understand the operation of the base. Since the first buildings we find serve for the electrical supply, which, in peacetime, was guaranteed by power lines coming from the outside. In case of a power outage from the outside, it was necessary to guarantee for at least 15 seconds electrical continuity before the switching of the backup terminal engines. This function was performed by the no-brake system, which was housed in a dedicated building near the perimeter, and which we began to glimpse on our left. The no-brake system was housed in a specific building located near the external perimeter and the energy building, in which there were the thermal engines. It consisted of an inertial system continuously in motion during the operation of the normal electrical line. The electricity coming from the outside kept set in motion are circular physical maxes that continue to rotate even in case of a sudden power outage. This inertial rotation transfer continued to provide energy for the time necessary for the switching on the thermal engines. Inside our building, one of these systems is still present, in which the large moving mass at the center of the machinery is evident. As you ascend, you can see the large satellite dishes in the background, aimed at the base in Nice, France, and in the foreground, the diesel tanks intended to fuel the combustion engines that supply the electricity to the base in the event of a disconnection from the national grid. Before entering the energy building, we see the lost antenna and the paraboloids we mentioned earlier, pointed upwards in the background, and we also spot the communication building. We now enter the energy building where the thermal engines were located, which served to provide power to enter base and primarily to the communication system in case of absence of electricity from the outside. The thermal engines were two large ones fueled by diesel and placed on these platforms that we see at the entrance. The building was obviously equipped with an overhead crane, since the size of the engines was considerable, and therefore such equipment was needed to move and repair them. Repairs were also guaranteed by the presence of some workshops and spare part depots placed inside these rooms that we see now in the background. Then there was an additional room where the equipment for the elimination of exhaust gases was located, since these engines produced enormous quantities of exhaust gases because they were very large and a complex ventilation system was necessary. Here we can see the huge fans that vented the exhaust gases produced by the internal combustion engines to the outside. As we head towards the parabolic antennas, we encounter the large loss communication antenna aimed at Cavriana, while in the foreground we can see the communication cable trays that carry data from the loss antenna and the parabolic antennas inside the communication building. And here we are having arrived at the large troposcatter communication parabolic antennas, in this case those directed towards the Tolfa station in Rome. Coming from the back, it is possible to notice the large metal supports that served to hold the large parabolic antenna in position, functioning as resistance against wind, which, given the size of the disc, were very important for its stability. But these supports also had the function of allowing small adjustment in order to always keep the signal aligned with the next session. The parabolic antenna is a large hollow aluminum disc that features a concave shape. Oblivious, the concave part is oriented towards the transmission of the radio signal. This type of parabolic antennas were all produced by the German company Krupp under a NATO contract and had both a receiving function for radio signals and a transmitting function for them. In front of the concave part of the antenna, there is a metal structure that supports the actual signal transmission system, that is, the feed horn illuminator, the one we see now in the image. This is the instrument that collects the incoming radio waves after they have been reflected by the parabolic disc, and that, instead, transmitting the outgoing radio waves toward the disc itself, which then projects them into the troposphere. Going up towards the upper part of the base and towards the parabolic antennas aimed at the Nice base in France, we once again encounter the lost antenna aimed at Cavriana. This antenna, originally created for secondary communications, became very important after 1968, when France threatened to withdraw from NATO. Worried about losing this important link, NATO decided to bypass France by building a new base at Dosso dei Galli in the province of Brescia, connected precisely with our Cavriana base, which could bypass neutral Switzerland and go directly to Germany, to then reconnect it to the original route. In this way, the Cavriana station became very important in the chessboard of NATO communications, even though France, in fact, never actually left the Atlantic Pact. On our right, we find the large communication building, currently not open to visitors, where it is possible to notice a dual height of the rooms. The taller ones were dedicated to over-horizon or troposcatter communication, while the lower ones were intended for traditional radio communication equipment. The difference in height depends on the equipment housed within. Over-horizon system required higher power levels and therefore needed large rooms to accommodate the equipment and manage the height. In addition to the historical value of these bases, from this last estimation, it is also possible to understand their landscape and cultural importance because they are integrated into environments that are often fragile and marginal. Thank you for your listening.